you've seen how difficult it is to get a Republican consensus. Until the election last fall, which surprised me. Let me just be very clear. I didn't expect Donald Trump to win. I think most of my colleagues didn't. So we didn't expect to be in this situation, and given how difficult it is to get to a consensus, it was hard to force that until there was a need to. And so that's what we've been working on. I will also say that there's been a new wrinkle in this, right? The early version, the early idea of how we would handle this difficult challenge was to pass a repeal bill that would be pretty much a clean repeal, stabilize the individual market, and set the repeal effective several years hence, and have the opportunity in the meantime to work out the reforms. That's all been collapsed now into a shorter time frame.
That is Republican Senator Pat Toomey doing a TV town hall in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, admitting that he didn't think Donald Trump was going to win, and the intimation is that most of his colleagues on the Republican side did not think so either. Mr. Trump pulls off the classic historic political upset, and it upsets the apple cart, where in days past with Mr. Obama in the White House, repealing and replacing Obamacare was largely a political statement. Now, when it comes to governing, well, that's an entirely different story. Here to talk about the politics of health care is Newsmax health editor and author of the #1 New York Times best-selling book, The Obamacare Survival Guide. It's our good friend, as we joke from time to time. We offer the sobriquet Sick Nick, but he's a very healthy Nick Tate. Nick, thanks for your time. Is health care proving hazardous to the political health of the grand old party?
No question about it. At this point, I think the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate needs to stop talking about what's wrong with Obamacare. Everybody acknowledges the problems with Obamacare. And start talking about what's wrong with the U.S. healthcare system, those underlying problems, and what are they going to do about it? Because whatever the Republicans do or don't do, they're going to own this next year heading into the midterm elections. I don't believe anybody in November will go to the ballot box looking at higher insurance rates, lower choices, fewer choices in the marketplace, and blame Obama 2 years on when the Republicans control both branches of Congress, the White House, and a majority vote and a majority voice on the Supreme Court. So I think the time has come to start talking about those Republican ideas. The Democrats have had their chance. We've seen with Obamacare what their ideas are. Let's take a look at what the Republicans have to offer to fix the U.S. healthcare system, drive those costs down, and expand the quality of care.
And of course, the temptation always is, given the fact that we have elections every 2 years, where every seat in the House of Representatives is up, and 1/3 of the United States Senate, that will be the case in 2018. But the temptation is to do what is politically expedient rather than deal with the structural challenges. On that point, Louis Gohmert was on the Rush Limbaugh show the other day as Rush was out, and one of my good friends was filling in, and of course it was good to hear our friend Louis talk about health care. And this is just an example, Nick, as how Louis Gohmert mentions we've talked about selling insurance across state lines. Louis Gohmert, being a judge, understanding law, says, well, wait a minute. There's much more of a fundamental structural change that needs to occur. Let's listen to what Louis Gohmert had to say the other day on the Rush Limbaugh program.
It is not going to solve anything just to buy across state lines, because originally I thought, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. That's the insurance companies, the biggies that are saying that, because think about it. In Texas, we're cheaper than California and New York, so what is going to happen? They're going to come buy Texas policies. Our rates will go up in Texas as claims are filed, and they'll come down in California, and we'll have equalized across the country. No, the one thing is that will really help, and we finally got it brought to the floor and we voted on. They said, well, it may not pass. No, it passed with over 400 votes. It's to eliminate the exemption that health insurance companies have had since World War II days. that exempts them from antitrust laws, exempts them from monopoly laws. We got to get rid of that, and then we can have real competition.
So that is Louis Gohmert with guest host Ken Matthews. Both Louis and Ken have been guests here on Newsmax TV. Nick, you listen to what Louis Gohmert has to say structurally about insurance. There is no doubt, we look back in retrospect, and the fact that in the post-war era, post-World War II, American businesses came to offer health insurance to their employees. It offered a variation on insurance that we don't see in any other portion of the insurance market. So Louis is talking about a structural change in terms of antitrust exemption. I don't know if Republicans are going to take that up, but it's symptomatic, I think, of the very real problems of the system that has been cobbled together, that evolved through the years, and then what was taken basically for a radical left turn by Mr. Obama and his minions with so-called Obamacare.
I think the real question here is, in my opinion, I will just say, I do believe that it's worth trying selling insurance across state lines to see if, in fact, it will boost competition and give people more choice. We know that there are various differences. In your home state of Arizona, for instance, rates are going up as high as 116% this year. In Indiana, they're rising by 3%, and in some states, they're actually holding steady. So opening up the markets across state lines might, in fact, drive competition and might drive those costs down. So I think it's worth trying. But I agree that it really will not fundamentally fix the essential problem, which is that healthcare costs continue to rise, insurance rates continue to rise because there's no restrictions on insurers that requires them to deliver the product at an affordable price. And to this point, the federal government under Obamacare has attempted to equalize that scenario for consumers by filling in the gaps and providing millions of dollars in subsidies. Now, my opinion is that if we want to look at a more radical idea that really has a proven record of holding down costs, we should be looking at something like Medicaid for all. Medicaid is the federal health care program for the poor that's federally funded, and it's administered by the states. So each state has a great deal of say in how they administer that program, whether they charge individuals a nominal premium, whether those folks who qualify for Medicaid must work. I think that it would allow for the states to become laboratories of health care by providing a kind of Medicaid for all, by allowing people to buy into it. The arguments for finances are pretty strong. To insure a Medicaid patient costs about half as much, about $5,000 a year, as it does to insure an American through the private marketplace, through employer-based insurance, and through other kinds of insurance, including Medicare, which is the program for seniors. So the idea of Medicaid for all, allowing people to buy into it even if they make more money than the current eligibility guidelines allow, might expand the number of people who could buy that insurance at an affordable cost and really do the job of controlling costs while also expanding coverage. Remember, the goals of Obamacare, despite the realities of Obamacare, were to try to drive down costs and make sure that people could buy insurance and get insurance, particularly those people who couldn't afford it or had a pre-existing condition. Medicaid for all, or at least Medicaid for more people, more Americans, would really move us forward in a direction that would have an impact on holding those costs down and achieving some of those larger goals of healthcare reform. And my hope is the debate in Congress will now turn to solutions and not so much continuing to hammer on the problems with Obamacare, but it remains to be seen whether that will actually happen, J.D.
Well, it's as I was listening to your explanation, again, and you're very knowledgeable about healthcare, and I'm not trumpeting this or amplifying it as a mistake, but you misspoke about Medicare versus Medicaid. And of course, historians, including former Speaker Newt Gingrich, said the genius of LBJ and the whole entitlement program of the Great Society was to have two programs so similar in name that the public would conflate them. Medicare, of course, is for senior Americans age 65 and above. Medicaid heretofore has been for the indigent. You're talking about expanding it. Here's the criticism a lot of conservatives have, Nick. It is that we have seen it expand, both under the Obama administration and with certain states using their own imprimatur after getting permission from the federal government, which is curious in and of itself during the years of Obama. But there's been a focus. Our friend, public policy expert Brian Rotella says, we have created a class of deadbeat dudes, young men, employable, in good health, millions of them ages 18 through 35, maybe a bit beyond that demographically, who choose not to seek employment because they've been included in Medicaid thus far. And the concern is that you expand an entitlement. The provisions of the buy-in would be most important on this to make it an insurance program rather than an entitlement.
I think that's the critical difference.
Certainly you can see the problems that are there. Yeah, okay, let's talk more about buying in to Medicaid.
I think that's the critical difference, JD, is that Medicaid has in fact been something that's been provided largely to folks who qualify without requiring payment of premium, without requiring in many states that people work or do something more than just accept the entitlement, which from a conservative perspective is essentially a handout. What I'm talking about is expanding Medicaid to a program that would be a ground level standard insurance program that you would buy into. If you're poor and can't work for whatever reason, and you qualify for Medicaid, that's one thing. But for those folks who earn enough of an income that they wouldn't meet those eligibility guidelines, they're not below the poverty line, and they are capable of working, allowing those folks to buy in would result in two things. It would give you coverage if you need it. It would result in an infusion of money that people are paying for their insurance, but do it at a lower level than the individual could buy insurance or the family could buy insurance on the open market or through these Obamacare exchanges. There's another critical difference, in my opinion. I think if you took the millions that are now being spent on the Obamacare exchanges in all 50 states and the millions spent on the federal subsidies that are going to individuals to help buy insurance on their own who don't get it from the workplace, Medicare, Medicaid, or the VA, and you took that money and you put it into expanding Medicaid as a purchase-in, buy-in program, not an entitlement, it wouldn't be tremendously costly. The difference with the Medicare for All program, the program for seniors, that Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton were talking about, is it would result in a huge amount of money, $18 trillion by some estimates, to expand Medicare for All. Medicaid would be able to do it in a way that would provide cost savings, give people more coverage, and give them an option to buy into it, not accept another federal government entitlement that would raise everybody's taxes. My view is that we're already spending that money anyway. We could spend it more wisely if we allowed for a Medicaid for All, a buy-in for more Americans.
So again, this is, back during the Constitutional Convention, there was the Connecticut Compromise. Nick, I know you're an unassuming guy. We'll call this the Nick Tate Compromise, and that is to change Medicaid, yes, expand it, but to make it a program into which Americans pay for insurance if they are able to do so. Expand the program that way with dollars already being expended. They can be expended in a more responsible fashion, and you're not just rolling out a kind of socialized medicine, but instead a new way to buy insurance. About a minute remains for your final comment. And again, just to reiterate, this differs greatly from the Bernie Sanders Medicare for All solution.
It does. I think that the truth is that the longer that this House and the Senate do not have a plan to repeal and replace Obamacare, the greater the likelihood that a program like Medicaid for All will get more attention. And it's not the Nick Tate compromise plan, although I appreciate what you're saying, JD. Nevada, California, and New York have all passed laws that would allow those states to do that with federal funds, and there are many experiments underway with Medicaid that move in this direction. So my guess is that and my hope is that in the next 6 to 8 months, if we don't get a plan from the House and Senate, focus on this kind of an idea might be worth a look. It certainly may not be what the doctor ordered, but it might be worth a closer examination, in my opinion.
Nick Tate, Newsmax health editor, again unassuming, not willing to take on the mantle of the Nick Tate compromise, but offering insights and analysis to the battle over health care on Capitol Hill and a possible solution. Nick, we very much appreciate your time and your insights today from Newsmax corporate headquarters there in South Florida. Thanks very much, sir.
Thank you, JD. Good to be here.
Now, your thoughts about what our dear friend Sick Nick had to say. Is the expansion of Medicaid the way to go, provided people buy into it? My Twitter handle is @JD Newsmax TV. Why don't you tweet me about what Nick had to say? And we're coming back as you get another look at the Red Rocks from Sedona right after this.